The smell hit me first when I stepped off the Greyhound bus. Rain-soaked asphalt mixed with pine needles and something faintly sweet, like honeysuckle clinging to the edges of autumn. Asheville looked smaller than I remembered, the mountains pressing closer against the downtown buildings, as if the city had shrunk during my 4 years away at pharmacy school. I stood there on the sidewalk, duffel bags slung over my shoulder, watching the familiar chaos of tourists shuffling between craft breweries and art galleries. But beneath all that manufactured charm, I could feel the weight of coming home to something I wasn't sure I wanted to face. My phone buzzed. "Eva, where are you?" "Surgery starts in 2 hours. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." Right. Lola's heart surgery. The reason I'd dropped everything and caught the first bus back to North Carolina. My grandmother, 81 years old, stubborn as mountain granite, and the only person in my family who'd ever made me feel like I belonged somewhere. I caught a cab to Mission Hospital, watching the city blur past through rain-streaked windows. The driver, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "You look nervous, son. Everything all right?" "My grandmother's having surgery," I said, surprised by how tight my voice sounded. He nodded knowingly. "She raised you, didn't she?" I didn't answer, but he was right. When my parents were too busy climbing their respective ladders, Mom with her real estate ambitions, Dad with his string of failed business ventures, Lola had been the one teaching me to tie my shoes, helping with homework, and listening to my dreams about becoming a pharmacist. She'd been more mother to me than my actual mother ever was. The hospital lobby smelled like disinfectant and anxiety. I found Eva pacing near the elevators, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, stress written across her 22-year-old face like graffiti. "Julian!" She threw her arms around me, and for a moment we were just two scared kids again. "I'm so glad you're here. Mom and Dad are, well, you'll see." We rode the elevator to the cardiac wing in silence. Through the glass doors of the pre-op area, I could see my parents talking in hushed tones with a doctor. Mom looked immaculate as always. Pressed blouse, perfect makeup, that practiced smile she wore like armor. Dad stood beside her, hands shoved deep in his pockets, nodding at whatever the doctor was saying with the distracted air of someone already thinking about his next appointment. Then I saw her. Lola sat propped up in the hospital bed, looking impossibly small beneath the white sheets, but her eyes, those sharp, dark eyes that had watched over my childhood, lit up the moment she spotted me through the glass. "Micho," she whispered when I reached her bedside, her papery hand squeezing mine with surprising strength. "You came." "Of course I came, abuela." The Spanish rolled off my tongue easily, the way it always did with her. "How are you feeling?" She waved dismissively. "These doctors, they worry too much." "A little heart trouble, nothing more. But I'm so excited to come home soon and show you what I've done with the garden. The roses this year, Julian. You should see them." Something in her voice, that pure anticipation of returning home, made my chest tighten. I glanced over at my parents, who were finishing up with the surgeon, and caught the tail end of their conversation. "Paperwork is all handled," Mom was saying, her voice carrying that efficient tone she used for business transactions. "Everything's in order." Dad nodded. "Good. One less thing to worry about." I didn't think much of it then. I should have. 3 hours later, Lola was in surgery, and I found myself standing in front of her house with her keys heavy in my palm. The modest blue cottage sat on Hazel Mill Road like a forgotten memory, surrounded by overgrown azaleas and a front porch that sagged slightly on the left side. This was the house she'd bought in 1983, with money saved from 40 years of tailoring work, the house where she'd raised my mother, the house where I'd spent countless summers learning to speak Spanish and eating her legendary empanadas. But something felt wrong. The yard, usually Lola's pride and joy, looked neglected. Weeds choked her beloved rose bushes, and dead leaves had collected in thick piles against the foundation. The mailbox overflowed with envelopes, some scattered on the ground where they'd fallen. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The familiar smell of lavender and old wood wrapped around me like a hug, but underneath it was something else, a staleness that comes from a house left empty too long. Dust particles danced in the afternoon sunlight, streaming through lace curtains that Lola had sewn herself decades ago. In the kitchen, I found what I was looking for, her small wooden desk, where she kept all her important papers organized in neat manila folders. Bills, bank statements, insurance documents, everything labeled in her careful handwriting. But as I started sorting through them, my stomach began to knot. Final notice. Past. Due. Account closed. The letters were dated weeks ago, some unopened, others clearly read and then hastily stuffed back into envelopes. How had things gotten this bad? Lola had always been meticulous about her finances, proud of her independence. I was photographing a particularly concerning notice from the bank when I heard voices outside. Through the kitchen window, I watched Mrs. Patterson from next door, talking to another neighbor over the fence. "Such a shame," Mrs. Patterson was saying, shaking her gray head. 40 years in that house, and now it's gone. I hope Julian's family knows what they're doing." My blood went cold. Gone? What did she mean, gone? I stepped onto the back porch, and Mrs. Patterson spotted me immediately. "Julian, honey," she called out, walking over to the fence that separated the properties. "I'm so sorry about your grandmother's house, but I'm sure the sale will help with her medical bills." Smart thinking, really. The word hit me like a physical blow. Sale. "I'm sorry," I managed, my voice sounding strange in my own ears. "What sale?" Mrs. Patterson's face changed, confusion replacing sympathy. Oh dear. I thought you knew. The for sale sign came down last week. I assumed. Your parents handled everything, didn't they?" I barely remember driving back to my parents' house, my hands shaking on the steering wheel of Eva's borrowed Honda. Mrs. Patterson's words echoed in my head like a broken record. Your parents handled everything, didn't they? Back in my childhood bedroom, the same pale green walls, the same creaky floorboards, I spread Lola's financial documents across my old desk and opened my laptop. The county property records website loaded with agonizing slowness, each second stretching like an eternity. Then there it was, in black and white digital text that made my stomach drop to the floor. Property transfer recorded, October 15th, 2024. Grantor, Dolores Lola Rivera. Grantee, Mountain View Holdings, LLC. Sale price, $185,000. October 15th, the exact day Lola had been wheeled into surgery. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. The signature on the digital deed looked like Lola's careful script, the same flowing letters I'd seen on birthday cards and grocery lists my entire life. But something about it felt wrong, too perfect somehow, like a forgery executed by someone who'd practiced. My phone buzzed with a text from Eva. "How's she doing? Parents won't tell me anything." Instead of answering, I called her. "Eva, I need you to come over, now. Don't tell Mom and Dad." "Julian, what's wrong? You sound. Please, just come." 20 minutes later, Eva stood in my doorway, her face pale with worry. I showed her the laptop screen, watching her expression shift from confusion to horror as the reality sank in. "This can't be right," she whispered, sinking onto my bed. "Abuela would never sell the house, never. She told me just last month how she wanted to leave it to you someday." "Look at the date," I said, pointing at the screen. "She was unconscious on an operating table when this was supposedly signed." Eva's hands flew to her mouth. "Oh my God. Julian, do you think Mom and Dad?" I pulled up the LLC registration. Mountain View Holdings was registered to a P.O. box, but the listed agent was someone named Robert Castaville, a name that sounded familiar, but I couldn't place. "Wait," Eva said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Castellanos. Isn't that Dad's friend from the golf club, the one who flips houses?" The pieces started clicking into place with sickening clarity, the hushed conversations I'd overheard at the hospital. The way Mom had talked about paperwork being handled, Dad's nervous energy, and those meaningful looks between my parents, that I'd dismissed as typical family tension. "They sold her house," I said aloud, the words tasting like poison. "While she was fighting for her life in surgery, they sold the house she built with 40 years of work." Eva started crying quietly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "But why? Why would they do this?" I thought about all those final notices scattered across Lola's kitchen table, the bills that had gone unpaid. Then I remembered something else. The way Dad had been talking lately about investment opportunities, and Mom's complaints about their mortgage being underwater. "Money," I said simply. "It always comes down to money with them." Quote, "We met at Drippolator Coffee on Marymount Avenue the next morning, far enough from our parents' house to avoid any chance encounters. Eva looked like she hadn't slept, her eyes red-rimmed and her usual confident posture replaced by something hunched and defensive. "I keep thinking there has to be another explanation," she said, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug like it was an anchor. "Maybe Abuela did agree to it somehow. Maybe she forgot to tell us." Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. I slid the printed property records across the small table. "Eva, look at the notary information. The witness signature is illegible, and the stamp looks wrong. Plus, you were there. You saw how weak she was before surgery. She could barely hold a pen to sign the hospital forms." Eva stared at the papers, her hands trembling slightly. "I heard them fighting 2 weeks ago," she admitted quietly. "Mom and Dad. I was coming downstairs for water around midnight, and I heard Mom saying something about closing the deal fast, and Dad saying, 'She'll never know the difference.'" My chest tightened. "Why didn't you tell me this yesterday?" "Because I thought they were talking about Dad's stupid cryptocurrency investments." Eva's voice cracked. "He's always got some get-rich-quick scheme going. I never imagined—" She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "What else did you hear?" "Mom said something about the facility and how it would be better for everyone. And Dad kept saying, 'Trust me,' in that voice he uses when he's trying to convince himself as much as anyone else." The facility. They were planning to put Lola in assisted living without ever telling her what they'd done. The cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. "There's something else," Eva said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yesterday, before you called me, I saw Mom putting papers in that locked file folder she keeps in Dad's study, the one she thinks we don't know about." I leaned forward. "What kind of papers?" "Legal-looking stuff. Thick envelopes, official seals." She was being really secretive about it, looking over her shoulder every few seconds. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a spark of something other than despair. Evidence. If my parents had forged documents, there would be a paper trail, and that file folder might contain the proof we needed. "Eva," I said carefully, "I need you to help me get into that folder." She looked terrified but nodded slowly. "When?" "Tonight. When they're at their book club meeting." "Julian, if we're wrong about this—" "We're not wrong," I said, though my stomach churned at the thought of what we might find. "And even if we were, don't we owe it to Abuela to find out for sure?" The house felt different at night. Every creak of the floorboards seemed amplified, every shadow suspicious. Eva and I waited until we heard Dad's BMW pull out of the driveway, followed by the distant sound of Mom's book club laughter drifting from the Hendersons' house next door. "They'll be gone for at least 2 hours, Eva whispered as we crept down the hallway toward Dad's study. "But we need to be careful. Mom sometimes comes back early if she gets bored." Dad's study was his sanctuary. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs that smelled like old cigars, and a massive oak desk that had belonged to his father. The locked file cabinet sat in the corner like a guilty secret, its brass handles gleaming in the lamplight. "Are you sure about this?" Eva asked, watching me examine the lock with a bobby pin I'd borrowed from her hair. "Too late for second thoughts now," I muttered, working the pin carefully. After what felt like an eternity, I heard the satisfying click of the lock giving way. The folder was exactly where Eva had said it would be. Thick manila envelope marked property documents in Dad's careful handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. The first document nearly made me sick. A practice sheet with Lola's signature, written over and over in Dad's handwriting, each attempt getting closer to her distinctive script. Below that, another sheet with her full legal name, Dolores Rivera, repeated dozens of times. Jesus Christ, Eva breathed, looking over my shoulder. They actually practiced forging her signature. But that wasn't the worst of it. Beneath the practice sheets was the real deed transfer. And this one was different from what I'd seen online. This version had corrections, whiteout marks, and what looked like multiple signature attempts. In the margin, someone had written "final version" in Mom's neat print. Then I found the bank records. Eva, look at this. I pointed to a deposit slip dated October 16th, the day after Lola's surgery. $185,000 had been deposited into Dad's personal checking account, then immediately transferred in smaller amounts to different accounts I didn't recognize. They laundered the money, Eva said in horrified realization. They actually laundered Abuela's money. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures of everything. The signature practice sheets, the corrected deed, the bank transfers, everything. Each photo felt like gathering ammunition for a war one never wanted to fight. At the bottom of the folder was something that made my blood run cold. A brochure for Sunset Manor Assisted Living, with a sticky note in Mom's handwriting, "Deposit paid. Move-in scheduled for November 1st. They've already paid for her nursing home placement, I said, my voice hollow. They're planning to put her away and never tell her what they did. I found Ms. Clarice Benton's business card buried in my wallet, crumpled and coffee-stained from my pharmacy internship days. I'd met her during a rotation at Mission Hospital, where she'd been advocating for an elderly patient whose family was trying to seize control of his finances. She'd impressed me then with her fierce dedication and no-nonsense approach to elder abuse cases. Her office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, painted cheerful yellow with white trim. The waiting room smelled like peppermint tea and contained mismatched furniture that somehow felt more welcoming than any corporate law office. "Julian Rivera," she said when I walked in, her silver hair pulled back in a practical bun and her eyes as sharp as I remembered. "I wondered when I might see you again, though I hoped it would be under better circumstances." I'd called ahead and given her the basics, but seeing the evidence laid out on her desk, printed photos of the forged signatures, bank records, the nursing home brochure, made everything feel brutally real again. Clarice studied each document with the methodical precision of someone who'd seen too many families torn apart by greed. After several minutes of silence, she looked up at me with an expression that was equal parts sympathy and anger. "This is textbook elder financial abuse," she said bluntly. "Forgery, fraud, identity theft. Your parents have committed multiple felonies here. The timing of this sale while your grandmother was unconscious and vulnerable makes it particularly egregious." "What can we do?" I asked, though part of me dreaded the answer. "Several options. We can file a police report immediately, which would likely result in criminal charges. We can pursue civil litigation to reverse the property transfer, or we can try to handle this privately, but honestly, Julian, given the scope of what they've done, I don't recommend that route." I thought about Lola lying in her hospital bed, still believing she had a home to return to. How long would legal proceedings take? Months, potentially years. And here's the hard truth. Even if we win everything, your family relationships will be permanently destroyed. Your parents will likely face jail time. She leaned forward, her voice gentling. "I need you to understand what you're signing up for if we move forward with this." The weight of that decision settled on my shoulders like a lead blanket. Expose my parents and destroy our family, or stay silent and let them steal my grandmother's life savings while warehousing her in a nursing home built on lies. "There's something else you need to consider," Clarice continued. "If you don't act now, and your grandmother finds out later what happened, she'll blame herself for not seeing it coming. The psychological damage of that betrayal, at her age, could be devastating." "What would you do?" I asked. "If it was your grandmother?" Clarice's smile was sad but determined. "I'd burn it all down to protect her." I spent the afternoon practicing normal conversation in the mirror, trying to figure out how to sound casual while my parents confessed to fraud. The dinner table that night felt like a stage set for a play I didn't want to perform in, but my phone sat in my shirt pocket, recording app activated, waiting. "So how was your day, Julian?" Mom asked, passing the mashed potatoes with that practiced smile that had fooled teachers and neighbors for decades. "Did you get a chance to visit your grandmother?" "I did," I said carefully, my fork trembling slightly as I cut into the meatloaf. "She's looking forward to coming home. She keeps talking about her garden." Dad coughed, nearly choking on his wine. "Well, recovery from heart surgery takes time. She might need alternative arrangements for a while." "Alternative arrangements?" I kept my voice light, curious rather than accusatory. "We've been looking into some really nice assisted living facilities," Mom said smoothly. "Places where she can get the medical attention she needs. It's really for the best." "But what about her house? She loves that house." Quote, the silence stretched just long enough to be uncomfortable. Dad cleared his throat and launched into what sounded like a rehearsed speech. "Actually, son, we've had some good news on that front. I've been working on some investments lately. You know how I've been studying the real estate market, and I managed to make a pretty significant profit last week. A big win, actually." My heart pounded so hard I was sure they could hear it. "That's great, Dad. What kind of investment?" "LLC deal," he said, then caught himself, glancing quickly at Mom. "I mean, limited liability, construction project. Boring stuff, really." Mom jumped in to change the subject. "The important thing is, we'll be able to afford much better care for your grandmother now. There's this wonderful facility called Sunset Manor, very upscale, great medical staff." "When would she move there?" Eva asked quietly. She'd been unusually silent during dinner, pushing food around her plate. "Soon," Mom said. "We've already made arrangements. November 1st, actually. Everything's taken care of." "Without asking her?" I pressed, fighting to keep my voice steady. Dad's face reddened slightly. "Julian, sometimes adults have to make difficult decisions. Your grandmother isn't. She's not as sharp as she used to be. The stress of maintaining a house, paying bills, all that responsibility, it's too much for someone her age." "She seemed pretty sharp to me," I said. "Trust me," Dad said, his voice taking on that dismissive tone I remembered from childhood arguments. "We know what's best for the family, all of us." The recording app on my phone captured every word, every pause, every telltale slip. By the time dessert was served, I had everything I needed. Now I just had to decide what to do with it. Lola looked so small in the hospital bed, dwarfed by machines that beeped and hummed around her like mechanical guardians. But her eyes were brighter than they'd been since the surgery, and when she saw me walk into the cardiac recovery unit, her whole face lit up. "Mijo," she said, reaching for my hand with fingers that felt like tissue paper. "I've been dreaming about my roses. How are they doing? Is Eva watering them like I asked?" The lie stuck in my throat like a stone. They're fine, Abuela. Beautiful as always." She squeezed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Good. I can't wait to show you the new climbing variety I planted by the kitchen window. And the tomatoes. Julian, you should see the tomatoes this year. We'll make salsa together when I get home." Home. The word felt like a knife twisting in my chest. "When do the doctors think you'll be discharged?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "Maybe next week," they said. "Dr. Martinez wants to make sure everything is healing properly." Her eyes sparkled with anticipation. I told him I needed to get back to my garden before the first frost. He laughed, but I'm serious. Those plants depend on me. I nodded, fighting to keep my expression neutral. In the hallway beyond her room, I could see Eva pacing, her face a mask of barely controlled anguish. We'd agreed she should stay outside during my visits. She was terrible at hiding her emotions, and Lola would read the truth in her eyes immediately. "Is everything all right, Mijo?" Lola asked, studying my face with those sharp eyes that had always seen too much. "You look worried." "Just tired," I said quickly. "It's been a long few days." "Your parents? They're taking good care of everything while I'm here? The question hit me like a physical blow. I opened my mouth to tell her the truth. All of it. The forged signatures, the stolen money, the nursing home they'd already paid for. The words gathered in my throat, desperate to escape. But then I looked at her, really looked at her. The surgical bandages visible beneath her hospital gown. The way her breathing still seemed labored. The medication IV dripping slowly into her arm. Yes, I heard myself say. They're taking care of everything. Good. She settled back against her pillows, relief evident in her posture. I raised your mother right, even if she sometimes forgets to call. Family takes care of family, that's what we do. After I left her room, I found Eva crying quietly in the hallway bathroom. I can't do this anymore, she whispered, lying to her, pretending everything's normal. It's killing me. I know, I said, pulling her into a hug. But look at her, Eva. She's barely hanging on as it is. If we tell her now, the shock could... Could what? Kill her? Eva's voice was bitter. And what happens when she finds out later, when they drag her to that nursing home and she realizes we all knew? I didn't have an answer for that. All I knew was that every day we waited, every lie we told, was another day my parents got away with stealing her life. So I told her everything. The forged signatures, the stolen money, the nursing home they'd tried to hide her in. I watched her face cycle through confusion, hurt, and finally, a quiet acceptance that broke my heart. I'm sorry you had to carry this burden alone, she said when I finished, taking my hand in both of hers. I wasn't alone, I said, thinking of Eva, who'd stood by me throughout everything, and Clarice, who'd helped me find the courage to act. And neither are you. Not anymore. My parents moved out of Asheville a month later, unable to face the community that had seen their true nature exposed. Eva transferred to UNC Asheville to be closer to us, and I finally applied for pharmacy positions in town, ready to build a life worth living. Some people said I destroyed my family that night, but sitting on Lola's porch, watching her tend to roses that had survived both winter and betrayal, I knew the truth. I hadn't destroyed anything. I'd simply chosen which family was worth saving. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.